Hi, hello there, and welcome back to Formula Amateur. Today we'll be talking all about the World Endurance Championship. What happens in there, what are the structures around how the weekend goes by, what manufacturers are taking part, where do they race, and other things like that. So let's get into it, shall we? So first, let's start off with the manufacturers. There are 14 manufacturers, and these manufacturers are Alpine, Aston Martin, BMW, Cadillac, Corvette, Ferrari, Ford, Genesis, Lexus, McLaren, Mercedes, Peugeot, Porsche, and Toyota. And all of these teams are able to run either hypercar teams, LMGT3 teams, or a mixture of both. And a lot of them do a mixture of both. Some of them don't. And some of these teams are also looking to soon join the hypercar teams, have their own hypercar teams instead of just having LMGT3 teams. LMGT3 is a GT3 category where you drive in cars that look like cars but are heavily tuned for racing specifically. So, for example, there are many GT3 championships across the world, including on the Nordschleife, like Max Verstappen drives when he's not racing in Formula One. And in terms of world endurance, these are reserved for people who have a bronze category FIA license. So these are people who are not as experienced in terms of not doing many of the top tier categories. So if they have enough points, for example, in Formula One, if they have a lot of success in Le Mans in 24-hour race or other categories, then they are more likely to go up in terms of their license. And there is a certain threshold each category requires. So a lot of the time, the drivers in LMGT3 have a bronze license, but LMGT3 teams also they have to have at least two drivers, one which has to be a bronze driver and one that can be either a bronze or a silver. And then the hypercar teams are ones that they are allowed to have silver, gold, and platinum drivers. And this is all dependent on their experience level, and it's a determination that the FIA committee makes as to how to award these licenses. So the LMGT3 competition joined in 2024 to World Endurance, and as I said, this allows people who are of at least a bronze status to drive in the championship. It is sort of in the best way possible, is sort of junior category to hypercar, but the points are still just as important, and it happens exactly at the same time as hypercar races. So there are two classes driving at the same time, as opposed to junior categories being having their own races before the top category. So this gives their drivers more experience to drive in hypercar or in other racing categories as well. LMGT3 cars drive on Goodyear tires only. There are two suppliers, one is Goodyear and one is Michelin. Goodyear is reserved for LMGT3, and then Michelin is reserved for hypercar. And the structure of the tires is quite interesting. It looks sort of like dragon skin, and it's made of different materials that are you wouldn't expect them, like orange peels and citrus oils. They are made specifically to be renewable, because they do want to make racing more sustainable as well. And all of these cars, hypercar and LMGT3, run on a 100% renewable fuel, which is provided by Total Energies. So they are able to know that this comes from a reliable source. It's a bioethanol fuel which is made from wine from the French wine countrysides and things like that. In LMGT3, there are three awards given. So one of them is given for the best team, one is for the best driver lineup. So each team for both LMGT3 and for hypercar have a 2 to 3 person lineup dependent on what the team decides, how many drivers they want to allocate to each race, and that also will determine how long each person has to race. This will depend on their license as well as how many people are taking part, for everyone to have a as equal opportunity to drive as possible. So if everyone can do a 2-hour stint during a 6-hour race, for example, like the first World Endurance race we had this year, which was in Imola, each driver can drive 2 hours if they are of a license that allows that. If not, they are of a bronze category in LMGT3. I believe they have less time on the track. So there's also another award, and that's the Goodyear Wingfoot Award. This is the only one that's given at the end of each race instead of at the end of the championship itself. And this is given to the driver of the LMGT3 category that has the fastest average lap during their entire stint during a race. So that is only given to the LMGT3 category, as it is sponsored by the Goodyear Tire Company, and LMGT3 only runs on Goodyear tires. And then the hypercar category, this has been going on since 2011-2012, and of course the cars every year for both categories change to improve and be more sustainable, be faster, be more efficient, things like that. So this whole championship has been going on, has been awarded the as a championship by the FIA in 2012, and the teams have been able to have world champions since then. It's the top tier of endurance racing as classified by the FIA, and this is more geared towards drivers with more experience. So those are the silver, gold, and platinum level drivers as well. And in this category, there are 2 titles, one for the manufacturer and one for the driver lineup themselves. So now let's talk about the structure of the racing, and then we will talk about the races that were scheduled for this year. There has been one that has been cancelled, one that has already happened, so we'll discuss that soon. So they have multiple free practice sessions in order to adjust the cars and test any things that they need to test before they put the car into qualifying. And then qualifying is set out in separate blocks. So LMGT3 qualifies separate to hypercar in order for them to sort of focus on cars that are like themselves instead of having everyone qualify at the same time. And qualifying sessions last 12 minutes each. And I forgot to mention that hypercar runs on Michelin tires only. During qualifying for the hypercar session, the top 10 cars in qualifying have an extra qualifying session where they fight for pole. This is the hyper pole that they refer to, and the team that qualifies as the fastest gets an extra point for qualifying on pole. This is not something that occurs for LMGT3, probably because of the safety around that. Each race has a different point system, so depending on the length of the race or the duration, and this means that there are some races that are dependent on how many kilometers you need to do around the lap, and there are some that are dependent on how long the race occurs over time. So there are races such as 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and 24. The most famous one being the Le Mans, which is part of the calendar, and it's probably the most anticipated race of the whole calendar. There are also, so this is like the main World Endurance Championship that we talk about, but there are also other categories. There's the European Le Mans Series, which is also a World Endurance Championship. There is also the American Le Mans Series, and there is the MLMC series as well, and those are all accepted, and they are part of the FIA system. So in terms of the racing, the first race was meant to be the Qatar race, so the 1,812-kilometer Qatar race. This was actually rescheduled to be on the 24th of October instead of the 26th to 28th of March. There are only 8 races in the WEC calendar, or the WEC, whichever one you prefer to say. So these are so there's very few of these races occurring. So there are quite big gaps between each race, usually on average about a month's break between each one. The race that occurred from the 17th to the 19th of April has been the 6 hours of Imola. They also had an official prologue, which I believe is sort of like their testing time, which is a week before that on the 14th, to determine how the cars are running, just to make sure that they are running as they should. The next race coming up is the Spa-Francorchamps on the 9th of May, when the main race is happening. And so that's the Belgian Grand Prix, and that's 6 hours long. And then the Le Mans is happening between the 10th to the 14th of June, and that's the 24 hours. That's the one that's the most anticipated. And then it's the Sao Paulo Grand Prix from the 10th to the 12th of July. That's a 6-hour race. And then it's COTA, the Lone Star Le Mans, from the 4th to the 6th of September, and that's another 6 hours. And then it's the Fuji race on the 25th to the 27th of September. That's also 6 hours. And then it's Bahrain on the 5th to the 7th of November, which is 8 hours. And of course, that is dependent on the situation going on in the world. And as I said, Qatar on the 24th of October, but it was meant to be in March. It was meant to be the season. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Formula Amateur. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope to cover a few more things about world endurance soon. Let me know how you feel about that in the comments of the episodes or the videos wherever you are watching. Don't forget to check out my lovely colleagues on the Be the Change Media Network. Don't forget to check out BeTheChangeMediaNetwork.com. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you next weekend. Goodbye.